Huge scam. You asked James Altucher. I asked him flat out, is formal education a huge scam? Yeah, absolutely, he says. Look at the people who agree that formal education is just a complete waste of time.
Hi, my name's Curt Mercadante, and I'm a husband, father, speaker, trainer, and disruptive entrepreneur whose mission is to save the world by helping individuals fight for lives of freedom and fulfillment. And that's what this show is about. We're here to help you fight apathy and conformity in your life. We're here to interview and tell the stories of individuals around the world who are helping others live lives of freedom and fulfillment as well. This is the Freedom Club Podcast, and we're grateful you're here. And welcome to the Freedom Club Podcast. I, of course, am your host, Curt Mercadante, and we have one hell of an interview for you today. Now, today's guest, I was just telling him offline that I get a lot of people in his age range that reach out to me wanting to be on the podcast because they started their own podcast like 4 days ago and they think they're changing the world. They think they know everything. They want to be on the podcast. And I have nothing against anyone of any age group. But my point is, do something. Come out, have an impact in the world, and then reach out to me. Well, today's guest is someone who is 21 years old. He is having an impact in the world. He is curious. He's come to that realization that he doesn't know everything, but he's trying to, well, he's got a growth mindset. He's got a podcast that's ranked top 15, I believe, in the education category for Apple Podcasts. He has a book out on Amazon. You can find it on Amazon. It's Growth Mindset University. And our guest today is Jordan Paris. Jordan, thanks for coming on.
Curt, such a pleasure. As I mentioned before this, of such great respect for you and happy to be here in the Freedom Club. I love this. I love the concept. And I think it's also worth noting too that, you know, you asked me to be on the show. I did not come to ask you. I've been on over 40 different podcasts in the past 7 months. Never once ever did I ask somebody. And so when you do work that matters for people who care, that's what happens. People, you know, I see posts all the time like trying to do 90 podcasts in 90 days, like get on 90 podcasts. And it's all about like, and then of course, sure enough, I get the message like, yo, let me come on your podcast. And I'm like, no, bro.
Yeah. I think you and I might be talking about the same exact person, by the way.
I shouldn't have said that, but yeah.
So yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it, when I was your age, you know, it makes me sound so old. I came out of school and a lot of people ask me, what's the one thing I would change or what's the one thing I've learned? And I think the biggest thing I've learned over time is that I don't know everything. And when I came out of school, I was arrogant as hell. I thought I knew everything. I had these internships in DC and New York City, and I came out. I didn't listen to my mentors as much as I should. Now, 20-something years later, I remember what they told me. And at the time, I was so arrogant. And because of some humbling things that have happened, I think one of the biggest things I've learned, the most important thing I've learned is that I don't know everything and to be curious. And you and I were talking offline on your website. And my goodness, a growth mindset means to be curious that you don't know everything, because once you think you know everything, you stop growing.
Yeah. I always identify with, one of my favorite movies growing up was Curious George. And I love the soundtrack to it. You know, one of my favorite songs is Upside Down by Jack Johnson. Just a really, a song that it's like my anthem, you know, it represents curiosity and all things love of life and exploring. I just really enjoy that song. And I enjoy the movie, and I identify with Curious George. I call myself, I had a Instagram post from like the Bahamas with swimming pigs, and the caption was "The Adventures of Curious Jordan." That's what it is. That's who I am, and I am always curious. I'm, not yet at the pinnacle. And once you think you're at the pinnacle, like like people who are closed off to new ideas, they think they're world beaters and they got it all figured out. And like, Curt, you got to let me come on your show because I've like freaking got it. Those are most often the people that are no longer curious, that think they have it figured out. And because they think they've reached the pinnacle of their knowledge, growth, success, then they have. and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And for me, in those times where my ego runs a little bit high, I'm less curious, and I think I have it figured out, and it happens every now and then. It probably happens every month or every couple of weeks, and I soon come crashing down right after then. And then being curious again is what makes me go back up a little bit higher than before. It's a little, yeah. So always curious. The Adventures of Curious Jordan. That's me.
Well, and I'm sure you've interviewed some incredible folks who are, we would say, oh man, they're at the pinnacle. I've interviewed some best-selling authors, people who get paid $40,000 per speaking gig. And it's those people, in many cases, that are the most humble, who will admit they don't know everything because they have that growth mindset. And they might be 50, 60, even 40s, whatever. They've seen a lot. They've had incredible success, not just financial, but in all areas of their life. And yet they are still admitting they have so much more to learn. And it's interesting, the people that we have talked about in this podcast already who, haven't done anything and are, and I don't want to be negative on those people because they will learn. Life is humbling. So
yeah, absolutely. And just, and we say this not to be negative. We say this, I think I can confidently speaking for both of us to be, just be aware. Once you start thinking, if you catch yourself in that mindset of thinking you're there, you made it, check yourself. Ask yourself some questions. Ask other people. What about? That's one of my favorite things to do. Like, what about something I did? A piece of my work. Like, what about this is unclear? What about this just sucks? And it's a way for me to constantly get better, right? And get off my high horse and be open to sometimes really downing criticism. I get it. Sometimes I'm like, or almost every time I'm like, and it sucks, but I need it if I'm going to get any better.
I work with a lot of folks who are in careers that aren't fulfilling. They want to make a change, and they have business ideas that are well within the bounds of sanity. There's a guy, I don't know, Russ Ruffino, he's the Facebook ads guy and he does webinars, and he touts one of his clients was a guy, and I've looked it up and apparently the guy's for real. He wanted to teach people to do headstands. And he did it over Skype, and he made $1 million in 6 months. And I always point to that, like, that's kind of in the bounds. If someone came to me, I'd be like, okay, let's figure out how to do it. But that's a far stretch. But people, they want to be a physical trainer. They want to do this. They want to do that. It's within and so they have some limiting beliefs why they can't get there. You're someone, now these are folks who have a lot of experience, have a lot of knowledge. Maybe they're 40, 45 years old, and they have those limiting beliefs that are holding them back. You're 21. So I'd love it. And you have a published book. You have a very successful podcast, which a lot of people are trying to crack that code and try to get their podcast. Well, first of all, they're trying to even start a podcast. They talk about it for 2 years and they never do it. They talk about the book and they never do it. Can you reverse engineer from where you are now, kind of your journey, to let people know how you got here?
Yeah. It's, I would say there's no sexy story attached to why I started the podcast, why I wrote the book. There was never like an aha moment. It's just a lot of decisions without hesitation, and it's kind of long. But if you stick with me here, I promise there's
sure. Yeah.
There's a lesson, right? And it starts with me in ninth grade. Like people, I was always the fastest kid on my baseball team. And people, friends, parents, even when I would run sprints at the beach house, my grandparents' friends all tell me, you need to run track. Like, you should run track. Stole a lot of bases fast, and I thought about it for a really long time, and I never actually did it. I was like, should I do it? Should I not? I don't know. And so for 3 years, nothing happened. And it wasn't until the end of my junior year that my only friend and I were like, screw it, we're going to do it. And we just did it. There was no deliberation. We just made it happen, figured it out, went to the meetings, and we were on the team. And turns out I sucked because, fast in baseball is average when you're running 100 meter track. So I really wasn't that good, but it was a good experience. I'm very glad I did it. Something, just another experience I have it on my belt. Otherwise, I would never know what running track would be like. Anyway, I just think it's cool. It's kind of like I look at it like, I never went to a prom in high school, and I look back on that, and it'll be like, I never went. I never in my life did I get to experience that. It'll always be like some concept, some fantasy in my head. It will never. So I'm glad I got to experience track. And then, moving on, football senior year. I never played organized football in my life. And same friend and I, we said, screw it, we're going to do it. And we did it. We figured it out, but we sucked. But I'm really, really glad that we did it. It was another decision without hesitation. We just decided to do it, and figured it out. And then it comes, I get to college. In my first week of school, I become a student athlete of all things. The opportunity comes my way, and I don't take it for granted. And I decided right then and there, without hesitation, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a male cheerleader of all things. That was the coolest thing I've ever done. It really was. And that same week, also that first week of school, I decided to run for president of my residence hall with 8 other people running. And I didn't know how I was going to win, but I heard it in the floor meeting, and I was like, you could run for president. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do that. I don't know how I was going to win, but I'll figure it out later, and I did figure it out. I had a strategy. I developed a plan along the way, and I won over those 8 people. And so all of a sudden, within a couple of days of arriving on campus, I went from high school loser to okay, I'm kind of cool for the first time in my life. And it was all from making decisions without hesitation. December 2nd, 2016, a friend your age, right? An older figure than me, right? A mentor figure in my life that, he read one of my papers that I wrote on health, and he goes, you need to start sharing this stuff. I said, okay. He said, you should start a blog. I said, okay. And December 2nd of 2016, there it is, jordanparishealth.com. Went up. I started writing once a week. Of course, it's now jordanparis.com. But that was the foundation, figuring out what people liked and what people didn't like. And by what people liked, I mean, this 5 people read this, and then the next one, 0 people read this.
Yeah.
So that's what it was in the beginning, and it was great. I was more doing it for myself. And then when it came time for the book and podcasts, when that thought just popped in my head, I had already conditioned myself to make these decisions without hesitation, and it just happened. Just happened. And April 17th of 2018 is when the first podcast episode came out. Only reason I know that is because Spotify and the other podcast directories say that that's what happened. Otherwise, I would have no idea. And I don't recall a thought. I don't recall a moment. It just happened. And it's worth noting, though, that this is, for me, making decisions without hesitation works, right? The more time I have to think about something, the more likely I am to overthink it and probably blow it. I know that's true for me. It's not true with everyone, though. I look at my friend Hala Taha, who has that awesome podcast called Young and Profiting. And, you listen to my podcast, episode 1 through 60, it sucks. Okay? It sucks. It's embarrassing. But if you listen to Hala, she has 31, 32 episodes. She's already, you go to SoundCloud, it's literally all public. She gets nearly 20,000 downloads per episode just on SoundCloud.
Just on SoundCloud. Wow.
Just SoundCloud. Yeah. And with that small amount of episodes, and if you listen to episode 1, it was perfect. It is the most value laden piece of content out there. It is so good. I think it was on communication, or it was on how to talk to anyone, and it featured actually 4 different people, 4 different experts. It was, oh my God, so well put together and mixed and matched, one of those highly produced podcasts. And that was episode 1. She is more, and she told me she's the, she planned that out. There was some strategy there, and there was some deliberation for her. For me, that wouldn't work because I would talk myself out of it and doubt myself. And it's okay to doubt yourself, but for me, I'll talk myself out of it. So
Sure.
it doesn't work for me, and I have to figure it out along the way. For other people, that's not always the case, though. Of course, look at Hala. So that's really I reverse engineered it, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. And that decision without hesitation, in her case, so I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach, I'm an activator. And so I, like you, I don't like to think things over. I go. Now, I'm at my best when I have people around me who are some deliberators to kind of, all right, Curt, maybe don't put your head through that wall, put your head through that wall, that type of thing. But I also, one of the biggest challenges that I run into, not that I run into, but that a lot of my clients run into, and I've done it from time to time, is that where Hala was able to deliberate and strategize, she actually jumped in and did it. There's so many people who that hesitation keeps them from making the decision, much less taking action. And they get in this vicious cycle of deliberation that can last for years. And, the older you get, the easier it is for that to happen because for a variety of reasons, you live more, you become a little more jaded. Certainly you have a mortgage, you have more to lose. I was reading a book by Stephen Ambrose it was called D-Day, and it was about D-Day and how they actually led, I can't remember if it was the Americans or the British, maybe both. They actually led on D-Day with the new recruits. Because what they found is the new recruits, they made decisions without hesitation. They hadn't seen the scars of battle yet. So they were like, yes, let's go. And they'd run into it. The people who had been through a few battles were like, whoa, they were a little more cautious. So it sounds pretty cold. But when you apply that to life too, I see people who are 40 and it's like, go back to when you were 20 and making decisions. And they would make those decisions like that. And, trying to get back to that mindset a little bit more to decide without hesitation.
Yeah. So if you're between 18 and 30 years old and you're listening to this and you're on autopilot doing what society says to do, and you have the job because, and you got the degree because that's what your parents and society said you should do. And you're not actually doing the things that your heart is burning to do. You're not trying that now between 18 and 30 years old. You're never going to do it. And you're going to look back when you're 40, 50, 60 and be like, crap, that was my window. Right. To do it. And now it's so much harder. Yeah. Now is the time to do a thing, to create a thing, to put something out in the market and see how people react to it.
Absolutely. And it's not to say when you're 40 or 50, 45, you can't make the change, but
right, you can.
You don't want to have that regret.
Yeah. It's just a little bit easier. It's just about stacking the deck in your favor, I guess.
Yeah. So you went to college. And but now you're not that big of a fan of college. How did that come about?
It came about slowly but surely, realizing as that first year went on, start realizing it. And I remember the first time thinking about it, I was in the friend I was going to say I was in the friend with my car. I was in the That's a weird image to think.
Yeah, exactly.
I was in my car with my friend, and it was the end of my freshman year, and I remember saying something along the lines of, I think that maybe if I were to drop out of college, I would be completely fine and make plenty of money. I mean, at that time, all I had going on was, I was a personal trainer and I had in-home clients and I was making $60 an hour at 19 years old. That was pretty good.
Sure.
And so I was starting to experience being able to make 6 times the amount of other people my age without any degree. Granted, I had a National Academy of Sports Medicine certification, but Curt, that took 3 weeks to get, not 4 years. It took 3 weeks of locking myself in my room. That's it. And do I want to be working for $60 an hour, training in-home clients, renting out my time for the rest of my life? No, but I was starting to realize, maybe I don't need this piece of paper. And my friend goes, you know what? I think you might be right. And from there, I started realizing more and more as I take these classes, like, wait a minute, what are we learning here that's actually relevant to the world today? And I was a marketing major before I switched, and we're learning things that worked in the 90s. And I'm starting to get into marketing. I'm making money on my own. And so like I'm starting to love marketing and I'm learning about it outside of school and reading these books that you see behind me. Namely, one that sticks out of my mind is .com Secrets by Russell Brunson is a really good one. And I'm like, wait a minute, what we're learning in these books that actually works today, that all of these, we want to call them real influencers, not the fake wannabe, self-proclaimed influencers, not those people, but the real influencers. What these people know and what their teams know, more importantly, that they're implementing for these people to grow exponentially, is none of it is taught in these textbooks, in these classrooms. And what's funnier, marketing. You ask a marketing student, you ask a marketing professor, who is Seth Godin? Who is Russell Brunson? Insert any famous marketer here that you and I know, Curt. I would ask people that because I love, like, for example, I love Seth Godin's concepts. I love it. I got his books behind me. And so I just mention it in conversation sometimes, like a concept that from his book, I'll be like, Seth Godin. Nobody, not one marketing professor, not one marketing student knows who these people are. Not one. No, that's a problem. Seth Godin is marketing.
Sure. That's why he started his own alt MBA, right?
Right. Yeah. And I just started to have this resentment because as I took on more responsibilities outside of school, it was taking me away from that. It was capping my earnings potential. It was capping the impact I could have. Such a cliche word. It was holding me back, limiting my potential. Another cliche, but it's exactly what it was doing. It was taking away from my headspace that I have to focus on doing work that matters for people who care. It was doing work that matters for people who care is my main focus, and it was taking me away from that. And it was a complete waste of time because we're not learning anything. Like, I'm not learning anything that I could actually use. Like, maybe you learn one thing that you could use in over like 90 hours of a course in a semester. But is the 90 hours worth it? Or do you just want to read a book that takes 3 hours to read and get like 200 things out of it? Sure. Does that make sense? And so I started to have this resentment towards it. Like, oh my God, and the money that it costs to go to these schools. Oh my gosh. And I was like, wait a minute, this is criminal. The student loan debt crisis is ridiculous. The student loan debt's up to $1.6 trillion. The average borrower owes an average of $37,000. Doctors, it's lawyers that owe in excess of $120,000. Doctors owe in excess of $200,000. Granted, they can make it back a little bit easier, but this is a lot of money. This is the kind of money that sets people back years, decades, if not an entire lifetime. And
it's not even what people owe. I mean, the amount of investments that are in the student loan area, in 2007, I remember being fearful for my job because the entire market collapsed because we did the same thing in the housing market that we're doing in the student loan market, where the government backstops bad investments and says, well, everyone has to go to college. And if you even utter the words that maybe not everyone should go to college, you're racist. And so they backstop it. You build this incredible bubble up. Now they want to give everyone free college without even debating the fact of whether or not college is even a great outcome or an outcome at all. And so what you have is this other bubble no one's learned from recent history. 12 years ago. And it's an absolute disaster, not to mention all the people who have been sold a bill of goods have that student loan debt. don't have a job or have a job and they can't even pay their mortgage.
They don't have a job because employers have recognized that the product, aka graduating students with degrees, young people with degrees, is worse than ever. The product is worse than ever. And so these companies like Google, Ernst & Young, you name it, are slowly but surely no longer requiring degrees because the product is worse than ever, and people are coming out untrained. And I believe formal education is a huge scam. You ask James Altucher, I asked him flat out, is formal education a huge scam? Yeah, absolutely, he says. Ron Carucci, he didn't say exactly that, but listen to my episode with him. Listen to my episode with all of these people. Dan Locke. Look at the people who agree that formal education is just a complete waste of time. And like all the successful people that I've talked to, 99% of them agree with me that this is the case. The only people that don't are the ones on autopilot that are, quite frankly, not successful. Those, what's the quote? Those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. This is like a case of that. These are like the corporate drones, the ones that disagree with me. And listen, Curt, I'm very offensive, and I know I know you brought me on the podcast, knowing that this is me. I don't hold any punches, but
no, I have a podcast.
It's a complete scam.
I have a podcast episode next week, and the title is "I don't give a shit if you don't like me." So I'm fully on board with that. People will point to, well, if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, and the fact of the matter is,
Curt,
Abe Lincoln apprenticed. The founding fathers. Now, people are going to bring up the founding fathers were slaveholders, whatever. Go ahead with that one. The fact of the matter is, the founding fathers who founded the greatest country in the history of the world, most of them didn't have formal education. They were all homeschooled.
That and I get that. I get that argument. If you look at my posts that are about education, the only argument that I get now that like isn't covered for, or at least that I just don't take the time to explain in a 1,300 character format is someone always goes, or at least 10 people on a post will go, well, if you're a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, whatever. And it's like, no shit, Sherlock. Sorry if I'm not allowed to curse. I apologize.
No, God, yeah. But that the system has created it that way to protect the industries so that, my wife is a speech language therapist, right? And she had to go through all this schooling, 6 years of schooling. She said it could have been totally short circuited, and everything she learned in 2 out of 6 years. I went to, 4-year university, waste of time. I had a fun time there, drank a lot of beer, the fact of the matter is, I had to take 4 hours of physical education. That was a state law. How many tens of thousands of dollars was that costing me and the taxpayers to pay somebody to teach me Taekwondo? And I'm not saying that shouldn't be there. I got Michael Strong. He was on my show a couple of weeks ago. He's founded the Academy of Thought and Industry. And he said, listen, he's been an educator for 30 years. He agrees with what you and I are saying. He agrees with radical school choice. So it's like, listen, if you want to go that route, go and do that route. If you want to have the traditional school, as I mentioned, we homeschool our kids, and it's interesting that the arguments I hear from people have to do with socialization, which is BS because there's bad socialization, bullying, alcoholism, suicide, all that. But they also point to prom. They point to, well, what about prom? And you know who brings that up? All the people who didn't go to prom or had a miserable time, and they're hoping to live their lives through their grandkids or through other people. And it's like, that's what's important. When you're 40, are you really going to give a shit whether you went to prom or not?
I don't. Like I say it in the beginning, but like, gosh, everyone I say, or everyone that like went there, a lot of people at least, they're like, oh my God, it sucked, Jordan. It's really nothing to miss. So it's a great point you mentioned with your wife, and the whole system needs to be revamped. I mean, in that area as well, in the medical school. My father's a general surgeon. My mother's a nurse. I have two uncles that are doctors as well. I get it. I get medical school, and I get you need to know how to cut people open. But
right.
and they're great. General surgeons or surgeons in general. Like they're great at when you get in an accident or some emergency is happening, they're great at going in there, fixing it up and taking care of business. However, they only know how to treat the symptoms rather than the root cause. Only 4% of all doctors have received any education in nutrition. Even less have received any education in sleep. These are and I don't care what you say, there are no two more important factors to your health than sleep and nutrition. Hands down, there's nothing more important than that. And they don't know. We got doctors recommending wheat bread and whole milk.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
This is bad. This is real bad. And all of a sudden, you're sick, and all they know how to do is prescribe drugs, and some of them get kickbacks. And all of a sudden, you're popping more pills than blueberries, as my friend Naveen Jain would say. Also, another person that believes education needs to completely change. This is bad. The whole system needs to be revamped. So that whole doctor-lawyer argument is only half valid.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I go back, the doctors and the nutrition. I'm a primal health coach, and I know people. Actually, I had someone on here, Kusha Karvandi. He came up with the, blood flow restriction, BFR bands, like workout. And he's written some nutrition books. He got into nutrition when his girlfriend at the time, I think they're married now, did she have Crohn's disease? So intestinal problems. And the doctor told her it was okay to eat Snickers bars. He's like, not only should a doctor never tell anyone to eat Snickers bars, much less someone with an intestine problem. I know people who've had strokes, heart problems, and they tell them, eat all. And it's like, that converts directly to sugar, inflammation, to your point on sleep. So yeah, Florida just decided to go after a woman who was a health coach certified in another state because she gave advice. And so it's occupational licensing. A lot of the professional schooling is about protectionism of a certain industry. And like you said, yeah, if you want if someone's going to cut you open and do that, they can choose to do that. But I have to follow the same exact track and go for the same classes for 4 years as that person. If I'm a mathematician, do I have to be a poet? If I'm a poet, do I have to be a mathematician? Absolutely not. And I'm glad that you're speaking out about it. Others are speaking out about it because it needs to be blown apart.
It really does. I had so many points to bank off of there that I totally forgot. But like the nail on the coffin with education and student loans and everything is people. I mean, I'm 21, so people a little bit older than me in their 20s are buying homes less often and having kids less often, even though they want to just as much as the previous generation. Why? In part because the student loan debt crisis. It's a complete is a complete disaster, and it's is a bubble too, and it's not good. Yeah.
So let's talk about your podcast a bit. You mentioned 2018. I think you might have said April 2018. Yeah, right. What is, so there, aside from the fact, and you've already talked about, there's a lot of people who've been talking for like 3 years about their podcast. We all know these people. I'm starting a podcast. And then like 8 months later, where is it? I'm getting around to it. It's like,
I know someone right now. Yeah.
Get a laptop, get a microphone. I mean, I didn't even have a microphone. I've recorded podcast episodes into my phone in a car. Who cares? It's content. But once you start the podcast, I've heard a lot of things like, well, just get really good guests. You talked about episodes 1 through 60. You compare them to your later episodes. You're not as happy with them and how they turned out. And I know I talked to the guy I interviewed yesterday, Victor Antonio, international sales trainer, awesome guy, had his own show on Spike TV. When he first left his job, he went all in on YouTube. This was in 2001. He said, I'm just going to do videos. And like you said, it's like 0 readers, 5 visits, those types of things. It was nothing. And he's like, and like with podcasts, the stats are not that great with podcasts. It's not like LinkedIn. It's like, I got 1,000 views, right away, right? So he kept doing, he gave himself 100 videos, 100 video rule. And if I don't see any traction after 100 videos, then I'm going to reassess and think, maybe this is a waste of my time. He hit 100 and all of a sudden it started growing. What was your trajectory? Because, a little over a year, I've been going for a year and a half and I haven't done everything right, but it's a slog sometimes. What's your secret to going from 0 to 60 and being like, to boom, taking off?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I got this right in front of me. I was just talking, 5 minutes before we got on here to my guy, David Meltzer again. And I last talked to him in January, when he was one of my first big guests on the podcast. And then from there, it was like, I kind of realized that a lot of people wanted to be on a podcast that David Meltzer had been on. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And I started gaining traction and started getting really, really big guests and, more people taking notice and starting to get tens of thousands of views on like LinkedIn even. And, it's hard to answer. What was the question again? Like what was like the trajectory? It's just it's still a long and slow process. Like there aren't many spikes. There's just not.
Yeah. I think
long game. Commit.
It's easy for a lot of people to give up because they do it for 6 months and they're used to going on LinkedIn and being LinkedIn famous in like 2 weeks. And then, with a podcast, it is just, there's sometimes, and I look, and sometimes there's just no rhyme or reason to like, wow, 500. And then the next day I got like 100. Like what? Like, but I didn't do anything different. There was no guests that day. Someone must have forwarded it around. It's crazy,
Yeah. I think, in the past couple of weeks, I had a low point and like a, decline. And I was like, what's happening? I was like, why do less people care?
Yeah, right.
But now this week I'm having a great week. And so, it's just, it ebbs and flows and so many, I guess the lesson here is, to not be so short-sighted and, playing the short game where, like, even in networking, like, Curt, what can you do for me and what can you do for me right now? And if you can't do anything for me right now, then we're through. Curt, sure. We've been connected for a year at least. And now we're finally just getting to connecting and doing a podcast together. It's the same thing. It's with networking, planting seeds now and reaping the rewards and the fruits of it years down the line. It's the same thing with podcasting and creating anything new. It doesn't happen overnight. And I was reading Rand Fishkin, his book Lost and Founder. Rand, who's coming on the podcast in a couple of days, who people are so he's talking about like venture capital funding and these companies, like people are so disillusioned by Facebook, Snapchat, Uber, all these companies. Like, overnight success, and like they're billionaires and or whatever, 100 millionaires, and the average exit, or I forget like the numbers, but the chapter in there, pretty much the point of it was like, look, it takes a lot longer than you would think. I think the average something was like 12 years. Gosh, I wish, Curt, I feel like I'm failing you and I'm failing you right now. Like, but
no.
There's a great point in Lost and Founder that says, it takes a long time, like right. Decades. So chill. It's not gonna happen overnight. You have to know that. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah, and in this day and age, it's like, it used to be that you'd put a cassette tape in and you had to either sit there and listen to the whole damn thing or walk across the room and hit fast forward button. And now we have the ability, it's like you're 5 seconds into a song, don't like it. And I have to tell my kids, like, no, you're listening to the whole damn song because I want to teach you to have a bigger, like a larger span of attention than a goldfish. And so that persistence being raised these days has to be tough because it's instant gratification of likes and comments and everything.
Well, I have an example for you. It's so funny when I'm in the car with friends my age, it's like they can't listen to a song for more than 30 seconds. Like we're listening to a song and I'm enjoying it, and they change it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I sometimes I've said it before to people. I'll say, can't you just finish a song?
Yeah.
I do. Like, I don't. Even if there's 5 seconds left, I have to hear it come to a peaceful close. I have to. I don't like that sharp end. I like to hear it in its entirety. Delayed gratification, I guess, is a term that's relevant or adjacent to what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah. So growth mindset. Everything you're about, you talk about curiosity as a journey of growth and self-education, while also helping educate others through your podcast or your book. How do you define a growth mindset? Well,
if you don't know something, you can surely learn it. That's what it is, very, very simply. And of course, Carol Dweck is the guru and creator of a growth mindset. And it's funny, I came up with this name, Growth Mindset University, for the podcast and the book before I even knew who she was. I didn't even know who this lady was, and that she created this term called growth mindset back in like 2006 or whatever. But after doing my research, I figured out that's the root of it. But yeah, that's what it is. That's
cool. What through this journey, what are looking back at,
okay, to add to the definition, it's you can get better with effort. And a good quote from Carol Dweck is becoming is better than being. And I think that captures it. Yeah, that's it. I just wanted to provide information in its entirety for the listener.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Looking back over a year and 2-3 months of doing your podcast, what are some of the most memorable nuggets you've learned from some of your guests?
Yeah. Well, this question gets asked plenty, and it's hard to think of this stuff on the spot. It really is. It's hard to think of any one person. I can tell you, obviously conversations I really enjoyed and got a lot out of her, like Dan Locke and James Altucher. I liked talking to Naveen about the gut microbiome and even the way with soaps and shampoos and topical things that like go on your skin affect your microbiome as well. I loved learning about that. Gosh, I'm trying to think of like one person. It's so hard, Curt. It's so difficult.
Dan Locke had to be fun. Energetic guy, huh?
Yeah, he surprised me. He was so invested.
Yeah.
Because I woke up to an email introduction to him on a fine Monday morning a couple of months ago with him and his team looped in, and I was like, yeah, I can have him on the podcast. Yeah, that's fine. but still going in thinking like, okay, this is a lot bigger for me than it is for him, and I didn't realize he was going to be as invested as he actually was. He was so animated. We had such a good time.
You got to get him to get. I don't think you've had him on, but he's on my list. I'd love to get on. Dan Pena.
Yeah,
Dan Pena and Dan Locke went to Dan's QLA seminar. I know, and Dan Pena's
by him.
Yeah, Dan Pena is an acquired taste. I know a lot of people don't like him because of his views on Trump and climate and things like that. But talk about a guy who knows his truth and lives it. My goodness, it's I binge watch his videos sometimes. So
yeah, I have to dig into more of his stuff. I've only scratched the surface with him.
Yeah. It's a lot of I'm going out to Brian Rose's London Reels Summit in October, and Pena is going to be there, and I'm actually mostly going for Pena. So yeah. Well, the one question I told you I ask every guest, and I'm going to ask you now, is what does the word freedom mean to you?
Well, I create it with my saying that is, don't make a living, design a life. Something that, and the criteria are, make a lot of money, have a lot of fun, help a lot of people. Of course, David Meltzer, our buddy's mission statement. And And if a specific activity doesn't fit at least one of those 3 criteria, I either don't do it at all or I outsource it. And so Don't Make a Living, Design a Life is like a grand filter over my life that has freedom built into it. It naturally leads to it if you design your life in that way around those criteria.
That's awesome. Well, Jordan Paris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. I'm again, very grateful we connected, Curt.
Absolutely. Thank you.